Welcome everybody to Do More Better, episode 9. And let's try to not get canceled this episode. Let's see what happens here. Something came up for you in a professional sense that was very, very interesting to both of us. And we're going to talk about it without talking about it, kind of an idea, and try to bring attention to why that's in itself is probably kind of a problem.
Right. So I should probably explain what came up to me. Okay, so this is not a question from a parent. This was, so where I work, there's a marketing department. And so when you're a psychologist, and I started as a child psychologist, but now I would just say I'm a general psychologist, and I do work with adults as well. There's a profile I usually fit, or a stereotype that usually fit, and we don't fit that. I don't fit that. And so I had been reached out for
well, I mean, as much of a joke as it is, I would say, one, our field at this point is heavily dominated by females.
By females, yeah. Well, helping fields generally are. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And then 2, I would say, typically speaking, I'm not trying to be nasty here, but I mean, there's just not a lot of savvy guys going on in our field.
Right. I mean, like I've met plenty of good therapists, good women therapists, good men therapists. But I just would say I don't fit the mold. And so our marketing department found out about that, and where I work.
Do we already need to start over, do you think?
We might. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to cut out from there.
All right, we're good.
A boss makes something out of this, man.
Okay.
We're going to have to. Okay. So,
a boss is our editor.
Oh, that's going to, you think that's going to make it?
There's actually a couple times where he has said, like, your guys, for
banter.
Your banter, your discrepancies are actually, like, that's the stuff that I think is pretty good.
Yeah.
That's anyway. So.
Okay. So, I had been asked to write an article on.
Back up. Why did you even get asked? Back up.
Okay, so to know about me. So actually, we
alluded to it.
We have these weird things in common. The two of us do, and so we were, both college football players. Let's see here. We both like high school athletes. I played baseball, basketball, and football. It was all state in football, all state baseball. I don't know much about what you did in high school. I know football.
Yeah, I did football and baseball through shot put.
So
we both have backgrounds in martial arts.
Oh, martial arts. Yeah, both of us got our black belt like around 12 or 13.
I think it was older for me.
I was 12. And so like sports have been a big part of our life, and I would say that sometimes gets looked at as being masculine, but I wouldn't say it's only masculine. There's some very feminine athletes who are good. And so I currently still do fairly, I guess would be stereotypically masculine things too. I still I power lift. I compete competitively in powerlifting, and I've just competed throughout my whole life. And it makes me a fairly masculine person. And I'm not, for years, I probably wouldn't have admitted it. I felt bad about being masculine. And then at a certain point, I don't know when it happened, it became this is who I am, and there's nothing wrong with it. And it's nothing wrong with it if that's not who you are.
I'd also say it's pretty unavoidable.
Yes.
Being around you, it's like, sometimes I talk to parents about their kids and like their anger, and I'll talk to the kid, and it's like Dragon Ball Z, where you ever watch Dragon Ball Z ever?
No.
Oh, never?
No, I know I should. I never really have.
So, they start like gaining power.
Yeah.
And like around them is this big aura.
Yeah.
And I tell the kid, like, you're kind of like that, man. Like, I can kind of see it.
The Jet Li movie, The One.
Yeah.
Like that. Like
yeah.
Everyone he killed. Yeah.
I would say, like, as far as masculinity goes, like, when people are around you, at least my experience of you is like, I mean, it's unavoidable. Like, there's an aura around you where it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, this is just going to be what we do.
Right. And I would say, like, there are things that are opposites that exist too. They're very dialectical stuff that I'm masculine. I'm also extremely compassionate and fairly empathetic too. I'd say fairly empathetic because I struggle with that one sometimes. But I think I do every now and then, like, particularly like for kids, I think I do not struggle with empathy at all. With parents, it's a little harder.
I think you have to remember sometimes my experience with you is different than other people's experiences, because you and I are pretty vulnerable with each other and say things that we probably don't do it either in front of other people or that even if we do in front of other people, are pretty isolating from other people. So
Right. Also, do you know Andrew in Hebrew is manly? My name is Manly Heckman.
it sounds like a superhero,
Doesn't
right
it? And so, like, and it's not something that's intentional. It's just like who you are. It's like you don't have to try to love your mom. You just do. Like it's just kind of a part of who you are. And I think I've gotten to a point that I'm not hiding it. I'm not going to be anything different than that anymore. Or like, I mean, I'm going to be flexible, but that's just who I am. And so I got asked to write this article on masculinity and therapy and masculinity and behavioral health. I'm not exactly sure what they're asking me right now. I'm going to meet with them at some point.
But they happened upon your current athletic pursuits and thought, oh, this is really relevant to that idea.
Right. I think that the thing that got them was that I am a psychologist, started as a child psychologist, but now doing more things, but who is competing at the national level in powerlifting, who has tattoos on their body, who does not do a traditional what you would consider therapy, I would say. And they kind of heard about that, and they reached out to me to talk about that or write about that. And we talked about doing this episode because that gave me an extreme amount of anxiety. And for somebody who does not experience a lot of anxiety, that was interesting, because I think I immediately called you and told you about my trepidation doing this. Is like, first of all, I love this idea. Like, I love the idea of talking about masculinity and talking about how it affects our lives and how it affects therapy and how it affects how we should do therapy and how it affects how do we get more masculine men to attend therapy. And I am extremely hesitant to do it. I don't know that I'm clear on why, and maybe that's what we're going to talk about.
No, I think you're exceptionally clear on why. It's more unclear about why to proceed with it. The reason is because if you write a op-ed piece on masculinity, the chances that you draw the ire of a massive amount of people is clear. It's going to happen.
Right.
No matter what you say.
Yeah, maybe this gets to my Christopher Columbus analogy I made to you once before. This will get us canceled, by the way. There was this mistake, so I'm not going to talk about Christopher Columbus and who he was as a moral person, but I will talk about him as far as what he thought. And I remember when I was a little kid and learning, like, oh, Christopher Columbus knew the world was round and everybody else thought it was flat. That's wrong. All of the informed people knew the world was round. It was this group of uneducated people, and there may have been the majority who thought the world was flat, and Christopher Columbus knew it was round, and the rest of the people, like, who were educated, knew as well. There's been a shift, and the shift is that there are a big group of people, some educated, some uneducated, but a lot of them uneducated, who know that there's something different about masculinity. And there's a big group of people who are highly educated who don't see that there is any difference. And that was the thing that scared me, I think, is that I know that all the people I see at the gym will tell me that, there is something to masculinity. There's something about being a man that is different than being a woman. All of the people that I know at the university level, and I know a lot of them, will disagree.
Even that itself is something that would immediately start dividing lines.
It would. Right. And so I think the premise of the question, even the general assumption of the question scared me to even talk about it, to talk about how my therapy with my young men can look different.
Mm-hmm.
It would, and it's not always that, sometimes therapy with a young man is the same as a therapy with a young woman. But I would say more often, not more often than that, but at least sometimes it looks very different, which is, where I think we start like getting out of the skinny branches when we talk about that small differences in the mean result in huge differences at the tail, and so, maybe there are small differences in men and women as far as their aggressiveness go on the average. The tail differences, there's huge differences in aggressiveness in men. The odds of, having 100 people in a room, the most aggressive one is a man is pretty likely, but when you look at the average, they're not that much different. And so, like, generally speaking, my therapy with a man and with a woman, not a lot different. Just sometimes is way different. And I would love to write about that. And I would love to try to figure out a way to engage more men and I don't want to say in going to therapy though. I want to say engage more men in how to live their lives better. We talked about that off camera, so I think you'd probably be good in talking about like maybe going to therapy isn't what we're shooting for.
Yeah, I would say, I bet people listening to us right now can already tell that we are trepidatious. I bet people can tell that we're trying to talk about something without talking about something, that we're dancing around a lot of things. And there's a fear of getting canceled, not only from a podcast, from our existing careers. If somebody gave me feedback that said like, that was 10 minutes of you guys talking about nothing without talking about nothing, I'd be like, right. Yeah. I mean, we're kind of trying to touch on something without absolutely thrusting it out there. But, at least at this point, the American Psychological Association has put out recommendations and guidelines for treatment for men and addressing masculinity. And the dialogue you and I had was basically that those recommendations, whatever you think of them, basically indicate a suggestion that there's supposed to be a role for therapy. And you and I said it has limited impact, or at least it doesn't even really address well-being for the individuals that they're trying to talk about. They're just talking about engagement with therapy. Mm-hmm. And sometimes maybe the best situation for somebody is not to be in therapy. We've said before in other episodes that maybe you go through an interview with a psychologist and the psychologist goes, I think this is normal and you probably don't need to see me. And that's a normal thing that should occur, that somebody comes and sees somebody and maybe this isn't necessarily what's supposed to happen. But as of right now, I think that conversation we had kind of stems from the guidelines right now are not about well-being for the individual. They're about whether or not they're going to engage in therapy.
Right. I don't know if that is clear to me that is the solution here. I mean, we can look at data here. What is one of the best treatments for a young male is big brother, big sister. That's not therapy. Mm-mm. It's not cognitive behavioral therapy. It's not dialectical behavior therapy. It's not acceptance commitment therapy. It is get them with a successful young man who's going to give them a model. And that will decrease their violence,
And that's not protocol driven or something like that. They just match you up and like, hey, take them to a baseball game. Like,
just
I mean, there's
hang
no,
out with them,
yeah.
Show them a successful young man. And so, yeah, I think I agree with it. It seems like the guidelines are around, how do we get them to therapy? And I don't know that I agree with that. And I don't. I'm worried about writing that, but obviously I'm saying it right now. So,
well, okay. So how about, let's back up for a second. When that was put in front of you, what was your first reaction on, just gut reaction to the idea that somebody wanted you to write that?
I initially was really excited about it. You know, I think I'm worried about young men, and I hope that shows up in these podcasts. As I'm worried about. I'm worried about young women too. I'm worried about both. You know, like, you know, I'm worried about everyone. I think that young men, though, that the suicide rates and their successful completion of suicide really worries me. The number of them going to college, the low number going to college, really worries me.
And their performance when they get there.
Their performance and their odds of dropping out. Their the rates of their being incarceration rates really bothers me, and I would like to do something about it. And then it hit me, and I started feeling, I don't know if it was resentful is the right word, or maybe it was slightly sad for sure that I can't write about this.
That was my first reaction. You know, your first reaction was positive. My first reaction was like, that is a really good hill or cross to go die on. And if you want to go die on that cross, that's a really great one to go die on. But yeah, no, the end of this is you getting crucified.
Maybe because you're more perceptive and got there quicker. I got there. And my initial was nice.
I would have loved it. I hope you would know as another man that, you know, I think the fact that you were identified to write that is honor in itself.
For sure.
I mean, that is like, I mean, you and I would probably fist bump on that somebody came to you and said, hey, we'd like you to write this. That is in every, I can't think of a multifaceted idea that does not represent just about everything you and I would say is pretty relative to a lot of the way we want ourselves to be. It's like, I just want to fist bump you and be like, good job, dude.
Right.
But my first reaction for you was, oh man, you're going to go down if you write that article.
Yeah, there's some pride in that. I think I don't know why this reminded me of what you were saying there is, I think that one of the things that gets me is this fallacy of the zero-sum game. Like you and I are sitting here talking about how men are struggling and men need something. That somehow means something bad about women. Like,
You're right.
Like if we somehow help men, we hurt women. That's a zero-sum fallacy. That's not true. If we help men, it does not mean we hurt women. You know, just like if we help women, it does not mean we hurt men. It means that people are struggling, and the world does not work in zero sums. You know, most of the time when somebody benefits, there's a benefit for somebody else as well. You know, if I'm spending like $700 on an iPhone, it doesn't mean that like iPhone just took money from me and I got nothing. No, I got an iPhone out of it. Mm-hmm. Like there is a mutual benefit, and so us talking about young men and how young men are struggling and how that we struggle with that, maybe because we relate to it. It's not a zero-sum game. We're not stealing anything from women. And they struggle too, and I want them to get help, and I want them to get the help that fits them.
That's a really hard concept for people. Maybe we ought to go over a little bit of zero-sum game. Just basically the idea that, you know, tit for tat, going back and forth, doesn't really add anything to society or contribute in some way.
It doesn't add or contribute, and it may not even be a reality. It may actually be. So humans are notorious for interpretations that are not based in reality. Mm-hmm. We do it all the time. We just don't realize we do it. You know, we have a full list of cognitive distortions, a full list of cognitive biases that we do. One of them, I would say, is a zero-sum fallacy. In that we, for some reason, think if one person benefits that it must be stealing from somebody else, which is not necessarily true.
So the idea behind zero sum is that you would find a way to actually contribute, that there should be a +1 somewhere in there. So I think the classic example that came out of like old classical literature is like charity. Charity is addition. Charity adds something. It's not detracting from somebody so that you can feel better on the other end as a zero sum. It's you contributing to somebody, their life is now better, and that actually adds something to the community,
yes,
to the world, to something like that. So when you say, I think young men are struggling, what you're saying is like, I'd like to add something that I think adds to the entire pot, not add something in one place because it detracts from another
like
another
it moves
situation.
them a level up without moving anybody else to that level. Because I would think if we can help young men, we would help society.
Right.
I would love to write it. I'm not going to.
Well, maybe you and I started like kind of trying to problem solve around it. Like, what was one of the things that we were kind of talking about? Like, maybe you could do.
Oh, right. Why I'm scared to
write.
Right.
Yeah. I think like I think it's a very masculine thing to tell somebody no, but putting that in written format of saying like, I understand why you asked me to do this, and I think I have something to say here, but my answer is going to be no. I'm not going to write the paper that you want because you're not allowing for me to write the paper that I want. And part of that, I think, also goes into this episode for our podcast, which is there's probably a lot that we're going to leave on the table that we wish we could address without causing calamity, that we wish we could offer up. And frankly, the audience is not going to get it. We're not going to go past certain points because we're not allowed to.
Right. Which is probably the problem that they face, the young men face, you know. Yeah. And that's that's all I have. I think that's the best thing I can possibly do here. And I already have communicated to them and saying that this is a topic that I'm really excited about and a topic that I'm most likely not going to write about. Mainly because I think some of the things that go really well for young men in therapy in a one-on-one setting don't always go well for the whole population. Possibly because of the Christopher Columbus thing, you know, is this, you know, what seems obvious to us, to the uneducated, is not obvious to the extremely educated for some reason. And what the data support and what they show, there are these differences in people, and those differences are sometimes divided based on gender. Does not seem to be politically correct. Sorry, gonna get us canceled for sure. It doesn't seem to be politically correct anymore. to what seems it is obvious.
I remember we were in a training one time, and this person was brilliant. This was Hayes out of Australia, the female Hayes.
Louise Hayes. Yeah.
And she was saying she got really sick of the idea that what we offer to teenagers is to take adult forms of treatment and water it down for the teenagers, hoping they get something out of it. And her initiative was to develop from the ground up a treatment specifically for adolescents that was not taken from one place and then adopted to another, but this is specifically meant for teenagers. And I remember when you told me that you were asked to write this article, that if somebody said the exact same thing about men, that they would be canceled.
That's a perfect analogy right there, because that was fine. We had no problems accepting that. Like, okay, that makes sense. Like, a therapy designed for adolescents should be different than a therapy designed for adults. Why is it that a therapy designed for men that's a problem? And maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm being sensitive. Maybe I'm scared, and I am scared. I think I'm nervous about it. Maybe it wouldn't be that big of a problem. I think it would be, and I think the two of us have decided it would be. But like, I don't see any difference in that. That's a great example. Is that, like, I do think therapy generally was written for women, and it works really well for women, and it works fine for a lot of guys too. There's a small percentage that doesn't work that same way. There's a difference in going about it, and I would love to write about it, and I'm not going to write about it probably.
And the world loses out. I truly believe that. I truly believe.
Well, I would say that that was one thing we've thrown around as an idea of, like, writing like a how to be a therapist for young men book. What we've talked about, and I've talked about. I've had several trainees of young men who come in and see, like, wow, I'm trying this, this stuff that I've been taught in graduate school, and it's not working. But instead, this is working better. Like, and I've talked about that with several of my young men trainees of, like, writing this book, and everybody seems to agree with it, and we're all terrified.
I think you got great feedback one time from a female intern that you were supervising that gave you the feedback that what you said is not something that they can say.
Oh, yeah.
That, look, the way it comes out of your mouth is different than the way it's going to come out of my mouth, and that we can't say, you're supervising me, giving me, suggestions and critique, and, like, you just need to know that I can't say it the way you said it.
This specific example, and I don't mind these, because this happened multiple times, but when I have a young boy who hits their mother, I've multiple times had to stop the session and look at the young boy and say, wait a minute, we don't hit girls. We already know that, right? I don't have to start there, do I? Because we should already know that by this point. And like 100% of the time, the boy goes, yeah, you're right. And that's, I think that was the thing that the intern of mine was a female intern who said, yeah, you can get away with saying that. And that had the staying power and made sense. And she said, I can't say that. And I said, well, very insightful of the trainee at the time, I think,
So what's a solution on this episode?
I feel like this episode is on the problem, not the solution, and I don't like that. That seems unsatisfying.
It just hit me thinking about something that I think is a solution. I think this is, you're going to have to follow me here on like a roundabout route to it, but oftentimes I think people believe they can't openly discuss the problem, and I hate that for people. So, I'll try to think of a good example. So, your wife comes to you and says, "Does this make me look fat?" What's the answer?
No.
All right. That's you're laughing. That's the joke accepted answer. I don't think people can actually. I don't think they believe or even know how to say what's going on with them. And in my house, we've got a major value for truth. We have a saying in my house: don't ask a question you don't want the answer to. And so if my wife came to me and said, "Does this make me look fat?" it would technically be acceptable in our house to go, "Yeah, that makes you look fat." I have never said that in my entire marriage, and I never will. Here's what I would say, which is something more to the idea of, man, I hate it when you ask me that question. I think you look beautiful all the time. Are you worried about how you look right now? And that is everything about what's going on with me and what my experience is. So when someone comes to you and says, "Hey, weigh in on masculinity," and you say, "Hey, here's what's going on with me right now," I think that's a solution. I think if somebody comes up to you and asks you for a question that you're not okay answering, I think you can say, I feel really uncomfortable answering that question.
That's good. That's a nice universal, I think, that you came to there. There is a, I'm about to say big, but I actually think it's a small and qualitatively important difference between honesty and authenticity.
Right.
And honesty is, yeah, you look kind of fat in that. Authenticity. So honesty is when you describe reality as though it is the truth. So I'm describing the world to someone else as though that is true. So yes, you look kind of fat in that, which I've never said that either. Authenticity is describing my reality to somebody as though it is the truth, at least to me. And so saying, look, it's really hard for me when you ask that question. So look, I really want to talk about this, and it's really hard for me to talk about it because I'm worried about what's going to happen. That is authentic.
Yeah.
Because that is my experience of my emotions and my thoughts. And that's something you can use with anybody in your life, and they're going to ask you difficult questions. And you can be honest, and honest kind of sounds like you're being a jerk a lot of times, or you can be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And they're qualitatively and massive differences in your relationships if you can shoot for authenticity.
I want to do a whole episode on that.
We should do an episode of authenticity because it's. I work with lots of teenagers. I'm just being honest. I'm like, yeah, and you're being a jerk. I can show you how to be authentic, and they say, well, that's just like buttering it up, or that's just like making it sound good. And it's like, no, it's real because like you don't even know what color something is really. When it comes to how your eyes are developed, but you know how you feel and you know what you think. Those are authentic, and you can give that stuff, and you don't have to. So, yes, let's do an episode on that. And I think that's the response I should have here is authenticity, and probably our listeners should have when they get a difficult question.
Yeah.
Anything that's difficult to them is search your mind and search your emotions for what is the authentic and true response. Don't describe the reality as though it is the truth. Describe your feelings. That's a really hard question for me to answer. Describe your thoughts. Describe what's important to you, because that's all you can really guarantee.
Okay.
All right. Maybe I'll write it, and if I do, we'll send the link to it.
Yeah.
If I write it, we'll see what happens. So.
Well, if you haven't already, click like and subscribe. You can find us on Instagram under DMB Psychology, and we'll see you next episode.
Dave Matthews Band Psychology, huh?
That guy's gonna get so much. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. You can follow us on our Instagram at DMB Psychology for updates and to submit any comments or questions. You can also find us on our website, domorebetter.buzzsprout.com, where we have info on all episodes as well as our donations and merchandise links if you'd like to support the podcast. You can search for us on YouTube and all major podcast platforms under Do More Better.